thank you very much for coming into the studio.
Pleasure.
Weekend before the general election. We just heard Boris Johnson there lay out his plans for immigration if he becomes the next Prime Minister. What's Labour's plans then? Do you want to see numbers go up or down? And what do you make of the
Well, we should have
plans?
a fair immigration system, a fair and balanced immigration system. Of course we should. But he's imposing a tax on nurses coming from the EU and beyond to come and work here in our NHS to care for our sick and our elderly. He's going to exacerbate the staffing crisis in our NHS with his proposals. And he's also misleading the British people because he's trying to give them the impression that he's going to bring immigration down. But when you look at the details of what he's announced today, he's saying he's going to hand over decisions on who will get a visa to an independent committee. He said the committee will be independent in the same way the Bank of England is independent. So he's actually misleading people when he says he's bringing immigration down. There'll be no democratic control, there'll be no accountability over any decision that any immigration minister makes because it'll be handed over to a statutory independent committee. So again, Boris Johnson's lying to the British people.
A strong word there, lying.
Well, it is a strong word, but it is. I mean, you caught him out on the fact that he's not delivering 50,000 extra nurses, didn't you? He had to admit, because you put him under pressure, that it's only 31,000 new nurses. So again, that was a lie, so and his 40 hospitals are a lie.
What's Labour's policy then?
Well, we need a...
Do you want immigration to go up or down?
But no, you want an immigration system which reflects your needs in the economy. So, for example, if a hospital thinks that a nurse or a surgeon is qualified to come here to care for our sick, to carry out operations on people who need operations, and my God, people need operations with the waiting lists at 4.5 million under the Tories, worst waiting lists ever at the moment under the Tories, then that hospital should be allowed to, those people should be allowed to come here. So you have an immigration system that reflects the needs of your economy.
So if the economy needs it, would you be happy to see immigration levels go up under a Labour government? I mean, many people would say that was absolutely reasonable position.
If the economy needs it, then of course people should come here to work in our economy, whether it's the National Health Service...
So you'd be happy to see levels go up?
Whether it's the National Health Service, where there are desperate shortages after 10 years of mismanagement by the Tories, or other parts of our economy that need people. Our care sector, we're going to talk about social care today, our social care sector runs on immigrant labour. And if the Tories are cutting off that immigrant labour from our social care sector, then our social care sector would collapse.
If you win the election, Labour's policy is to negotiate a new deal with the EU, a new Brexit deal. Would free movement of people come to an end under that deal?
Well, that depends what's in the deal, doesn't it? But what we're very clear
you'll be negotiating it.
Well, it depends what's in that deal. I mean, but I think actually free movement has been good for the UK economy. Public services like the NHS have benefited hugely from free movement across the European Union.
So you would like Labour to go into these negotiations with a position to keep
Well, these things will be negotiated, but it's why, for example, that we should absolutely maintain free movement for the National Health Service and the social care sector, because they are both sectors that literally could not survive if we did not continue to recruit internationally, which is why the proposal to slap a £400 tax on nurses coming from the EU is highly irresponsible from Boris Johnson.
So is there a Brexit deal that you theoretically could support personally?
Well, we'll see what gets negotiated. I mean, I've always... I've always been pretty clear that I think the United Kingdom's best interests for the future are best served by remaining within the European Union. That's why I campaigned for Remain. That's why I think that Remain, if it should be put to the people, and they should decide in the end in a referendum. I've always been clear on that.
Some people listening to you will be like, what's the point of Labour even going into these negotiations if so many people like yourselves are saying quite openly already that you think Remain is effectively the best option?
Because we lost the argument in the country, didn't we? I mean, the country voted to leave. So I think the responsible thing now is to bring both sides of the country back together and say to the country, look, this is what leave looks like, right? Because, you know, Boris Johnson had all these sodding buses going around the country saying it'd be 350 million extra a week. Well, that never turned out to be true, did it? So this is what leave looks like. This is a credible leave, but if you don't think that is what you want for the country, here's your opportunity to remain.
Are you ruling out supporting any deal that a Labour government could?
Well, I think our country's best interests are served by remaining, but I also am aware. But I'm also aware that the country needs to make the final decision, and in the end, it's the British people who will decide.
Okay. You got an announcement about social care this morning. What is Labour planning to do?
Well, essentially, we're announcing free personal social care because, you know, throughout this election campaign, you've seen heartbreaking stories of elderly people languishing on trolleys in hospital corridors, sometimes for hours upon hours, a 99-year-old war veteran down in Kent waiting for 10 hours in a hospital corridor on a trolley. I mean, it's really quite shameful. The fact that Boris Johnson can't get a grip of this is quite appalling, actually, when you think about it. And part of the reason why our NHS is under such intense pressure is, yes, 10 years of cutbacks across health services, but we've had these savage cuts to social care budgets. This is the support that elderly people get in the community to stay in their home. So we're going to put more support in. We're going to fund it properly, £10 billion extra, and we're going to introduce free personal care, because I don't want to have people languishing on trolleys in hospital corridors for hours and hours and hours.
What does that mean, free personal care? Does that mean no one will have to pay anything for their care?
It means that no one will have to pay anything for the care that they get in their home. There's support, getting out of bed, support with
no matter how wealthy they are.
Cleaning. Yeah, but this is about ensuring fairness in the system.
It's expensive, though.
Well, we're putting £10 billion extra in. And look, you know, this issue on social care has been ducked by parties for years now, hasn't it? Boris Johnson said he had a big priority for it, or a big plan for it on the steps of Downing Street, and his plan's vanished, hasn't he? He hasn't got a plan. So we think it's time to put forward a serious, credible, costed plan for social care, which is why we're putting £10 billion extra into the system to provide everyone with free personal care.
I mean, £10 billion is already a big chunk of money. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says that because of the ageing population, because of the growing pressures, the amount of money needed for social care is going to keep going up and up. Is this a blank cheque? Will you just keep putting in as much money as needed so that everybody, no matter how wealthy, can have free personal care?
Well, we are an ageing society, and the fact that we've ducked this issue as a country for so long is a disgrace, really. And what Boris Johnson wants to do is have more sort of discussions and commissions.
Is it a blank cheque for however much it costs in the future? You know, the Labour government will keep.
Well, but you can say that about
free.
You can say that about any aspect of public services. Is the NHS a blank cheque? Is the schools a blank cheque? We're going to carry on having children as a nation. Is in funding schools is a blank cheque? Of course, governments always make decisions about how to fund services for the future. But we will invest in public services, and we think the right way to do that is by asking the welfare in society, those with the broadest shoulders, to pay a little bit extra in taxation to fund our public services. And that would include the National Care Service that we're announcing today.
I mean, some will think this just sounds like more free things from Labour, more spending, and they'd be questioning how this is going to be paid for in the future.
Well, as I've said, we will make different decisions on taxation. I mean, we've had for 10 years now a Conservative government giving big tax cuts to corporations, big tax cuts to the wealthiest, while at the same time cutting social care and cutting health services. I don't think they are the right choices for the country, particularly when you look at where we are now, with 4.5 million people on the waiting list. We've got news today that we've got the worst cancer rates in ever on record. That's people with cancer waiting longer for treatment. And of course, this Christmas Day, there'll be 135,000 children in this country not homeless, not in temporary accommodation. I think that's disgraceful. And these are the things we need to turn around, which is why we're prepared to put up tax for the wealthiest to fund public services and fund tackling child poverty.
The Conservatives have said that if they win the election, they want to get different parties around the table and come up with a cross-party solution to the social care crisis. If you are still the Shadow Health Secretary after the election...
Well, I won't be the Shadow Health Secretary.
I know you want to win, but if there is a chance that you don't win, would you be prepared to get round a table with the Conservatives and come up with a cross-party
No, the question is...
It's a serious question.
We are going to legislate to introduce a National Care Service. So the question is, will the Conservatives vote for our National Care Service or will they vote against it? Because we're going to be the government.
It's a really serious question.
It is a serious question.
Are you prepared to work with the Conservatives?
But we're not going to be in opposition, we're going to be in government.
We won't just engage with it at all. I mean, most people would say, why won't you just say that you'll get round the table with the opposition?
Well, when I am the Secretary of State for Health, I will invite the Shadow Health Secretary in to discuss our national care plans and see if they want to support them or not.
You can't even...
I've just said we'll have a cross-party discussion. We'll discuss our national care plan and the fact that we're putting £10 billion extra into social care.
So but I know you don't want to talk about losing, but you may lose, and if you do...
Well, if we lose, we'll deal with it then.
But would you be prepared in theory to get around the table with the Conservatives?
I'm always
serious issue.
I'm always prepared.
It shouldn't be party political.
I'm always prepared to talk to whoever. You know, and that's the sort of guy I am. But look, I'm going to be the Health Secretary. We're going to have a Labour government, and we're going to have a Labour government to fix the waiting list, which are 4.5 million, to fix the cancer waiting list, and to fix social care, which has been avoided for years by governments. OK,
it's pretty clear that you want to be the Health Secretary after the election. We've got that message through. However, YouGov and Data Praxis have published their latest seat projection poll, which is looking at all the different constituencies, modelling how the polling would map out if there was a general election held right now. And of course, things can still change. We've still got 4 days to go. But it shows, this poll, that although things have been narrowing, the Conservatives, in their view, are still on for a majority.
Yeah.
You can see there, 344 seats are projected for the Conservatives, 221 for Labour. If you look at this, are you worried?
Well, look, that's an opinion poll. There's a few days to go. And I think the question, or the point I would say to British people, the people watching the programme this morning is, look, do we really want 5 more years of the Tories running our NHS when there's 4.5 million people on the waiting list? 5 more years of the Tories failing to deal with cancer when people got cancer and not getting the treatment on time. I mean, and if I like to paraphrase a famous former Labour leader, I warn people not to get ill with 5 more years of the Tories wrecking the NHS. I warn people not to get poor with child poverty going through the roof under the Tories. These are the issues which people have to be thinking about on Thursday. Do we really want 5 more years of the Tories on our NHS?
If it means that they're going to end up with more seats now than before?
Well, because because in the end we had to go for an election, didn't we? Because we wanted to put our programme to the government. And when the NHS is in the state that it is in, with people waiting on trolleys for hours upon hours, then of course we had to go for a general election to kick out this Tory government to save the NHS. And there's a few days left to go. And I'll be, in the next few days, pushing that message even harder. Do you want 5 more years of the Tories wrecking our NHS, cutting social care, cutting health services and people and privatising our NHS even further?
You clearly feel very strongly about the NHS under the Conservative government. So the question, I guess, is why is it that Labour is still not absolutely steamrolling ahead in the polls? And I have to say that when I go out and about, which I have done every week throughout the election campaign, something that comes up quite a lot is Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, is that something you hear? Well,
look, we've got a few days now left to go, right? And we'll see what the result is on Thursday night. But this general election really is... No, the question is this general election about the future of the NHS?
That wasn't my question, and we have spoken about the NHS. My question was, do you hear people raising the question of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership?
Well, I hear people raising issues around Jeremy Corbyn. I hear people raising issues around Boris Johnson. Literally yesterday on the doorstep, someone said to me, they do not trust Boris Johnson. He will go in with Trump and sell off our NHS. I got that on the doorstep yesterday from a voter.
Even though Donald Trump said this week that he said, I quote, "We have absolutely nothing to do with it, and we wouldn't want to if you hand it to us on a silver platter."
Yeah, but
is that what you said to that person on the doorstep?
No, it's not. That's not what I said to that person on the doorstep. What I said to him, that person on the doorstep, is what Donald Trump wants is to smash up the way in which our regulatory regime works for medicines, because he has said he thinks other nations are freeloading when it comes to purchasing drugs, which is why US firms cannot get the prices for drugs that they want in other countries. And the Americans have made it explicit that they want the UK and other countries around the world to pay more for US drugs, and that will be an explicit part of a trade deal. And the Tories cannot rule that out. It will cost us up to £500 million a week, and it will mean cuts to staffing. It will mean people waiting longer for treatment because the money won't be there in the NHS under the Tories.
If you lose the election on Thursday,
we won't lose.
Should Jeremy Corbyn stand down as
We're not going to lose the election on Thursday. We're going to win.
OK. Jon Ashworth, thank you very much for coming on the programme today. Thank you.